Welcome to Social Breakfast interview with Nick Radford. Nick is a parliamentary candidate for Salisbury, standing in the general election this May, to be MP for the area. Nick is only 26. Nick's a user of social media, so he's quite an appropriate candidate for this side, which is obviously a youth engagement side. Nick is standing against a Tory candidate. So, hi Nick, how are you?
Hi, fine, thanks.
Do you want to give sort of a quick introduction to yourself and maybe to key Lib Dem policies for those who may be unfamiliar?
Yeah, I certainly can. As you say, I'm 26. I've lived in South Wiltshire pretty much all my life. I went away to university and I had a few jobs here and there. I run a local business, a solar panel business, so we put panels on people's roofs. So that's what I do for a living.
Wow.
And the reason I was attracted to the Lib Dems really is because of one key concept which they embody better than any other party, and that's fairness. And all of the policies which we put out there embody that idea of that people should be free to live their lives as they wish, but not if it imposes on anybody else's ability to do the same. And so fairness is a key concept. I mean, the four key manifesto promises that we're making as we go into this general election are fair taxes. We're still in a situation where the richest 10% of people pay less in tax than the poorest 10%. It's completely unfair. It's a regressive tax system. We're taxing the poor to pay the rich. It's wrong. And the Liberal Democrats would increase the tax threshold so that everybody would be able to earn £10,000 tax-free, and we would pay for that by closing loopholes on the very rich and introducing a mansion tax on homes over 2 million. So that's the first of one of four key pledges. The second is building a green economy with jobs that last, because we've all seen how we've all seen how the economy has fallen around our knees in the last couple of years.
Need a new solution.
We do, and a lot of the problems are structural. We're massively over-dependent on the financial sector, and we need to increase the number of green jobs, like the business that I run, so that we can solve both our environmental and our economic problems at the same time.
Yeah.
The fourth is a clean political system.
Okay.
If it wasn't bad enough that the economy was falling down around us, the political system has completely disgraced itself in the last year with MP's expenses scandal. And the Liberal Democrats have long been saying that we need to reform our political system, give people fair votes, fixed-term parliaments and elected lords. We need root and branch reform of our political system. And all of those policies are key, absolutely key. And the fourth one, which has particular resonance here in Wiltshire, which I'm campaigning very hard on, is fair funding for schools.
Okay.
And Wiltshire, for example, receives the fifth lowest level of education funding of anywhere in the country. And the only reason for this seems to be tradition, and it's the way it's always been. And the Liberal Democrats are promising, it's one of the few areas in this time of budget crisis that we're actually promising more money for schools to raise areas like Wiltshire, which are in the lowest percentile, up to the standard of other parts of the country, because it's only fair that kids in Wiltshire get as fair a chance in life as anyone else.
Okay.
So those are the four key priorities: fair taxes, a green economy, clean politics, and more funding for schools.
All right, thanks, Nick. Hopefully that will give people more of an idea about what the Lib Dems say they will deliver. I'm glad you mentioned Salisbury at the end there, because I'm just about to move on to a question sort of specifically about young people in areas that are quite rural, which arguably Salisbury is. It is a city, but it's known as a city in the countryside, and it's only got a population of 50,000. So we will move on to a question relating to that in the next part. Okay, so Julia asked a question for you, Nick. What do you think are the concerns of young people in rural areas, and are they being addressed by politicians?
Well, I can speak with direct experience of this, Julia, because I grew up in the city when I was young, but then when I was I think I was 12, we moved out to a small little village on the outskirts of Salisbury. And so I kind of grew up in my teens being pretty much isolated and completely unable to get anywhere or do anything as a young person, and it was really frustrating. So I think that's the key thing which I was concerned about, and I know it's what other young people are concerned about in rural settings. And actually, it comes down to buses, because if you can't drive, the only way you're going to get around, and you can't afford a taxi, the only way you're going to get around is the bus.
Yeah.
Now, we've seen a decline in rural bus services. There are less rural buses running than there were before. There are certainly less rural trains, so buses have become the public transport mode which young people depend on.
Yeah.
And the problem is that they're all controlled by private companies. So the local council really has very little say in where the bus services run, how often they run, and what the fares are. It's all controlled by private companies. So it would be, like the council telling Tesco's what kind of baked beans to sell. It's completely separate from public control, and I think that's a problem. And the Liberal Democrats' party policy is to actually give local councils more control over bus companies, so that they can set the priorities and the routes and the fares based on local need rather than based on the ability to make profit. So I think that would be the single most important thing I would suggest is important for young people in rural settings.
So with regard to transport, you wouldn't agree that privatisation creates competition and therefore drives down prices, which I remember being the case in Manchester, for example. Would you say that we need more local authority control in that area?
I would say we do need more local authority control, and I think that privatisation and competition only work when the consumer can choose. This is why privatisation of the rail system, I think, it's a false reason for being a benefit, because you don't stand on the platform and say, well, shall I take the Virgin train or the South West train? Right. You take the train that comes at 10:22. Yeah. Okay. And you don't have a choice over what that is. So competition doesn't actually apply, and the consumer is actually the government, because the companies are bidding with the government to run certain routes. Okay. Now that's not even the case with buses. Buses just put on the routes that they want to run. Yeah. So absolutely, privatisation and market economics have a role to play in delivering public services. There's no doubt about that. But it's not the solution for every problem. And local authority control is important in some areas, particularly in rural settings, when the market won't deliver.
All right, well, thanks, Nick. It's good to know that you think that's a key issue. So let's move on to, I suppose, party politics. You're up against a Tory candidate, although the Lib Dems are the third biggest party in the country. They're the second party in this area. John Tank says he thinks you should join the Conservative Party. He thinks he'd make a good MP, but he wants you to join the Tories. What do you think about that?
Well, I'm grateful that John thinks I'd make a good MP. Thank you. There is absolutely no way that I'm going to join the Conservative Party, though. For me, there is a dividing line in politics. You're either progressive, you want to change things for the better, or you're a conservative and you want things to stay the same. Okay. And I'm a progressive. Okay. I'm not a conservative, I'm afraid. I don't believe that they have the answers to the problems which modern Britain faces, and I don't believe that they've changed at all, regardless of what David Cameron might be trying to sell to us. So you're right, here in Salisbury it is a fight between the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats. It's a two-horse race. Labour can't win in Salisbury. And what's really exciting is now that Robert Key, who was the MP before this new candidate, he's been the MP here for 27 years as a Conservative, and he's standing down, which makes it a marginal seat. It really opens things up, and it means the Liberal Democrats have got a really good chance of winning in 2010 in Salisbury, in the same way which we have MPs in Winchester and Yeovil. So it's an exciting time for Liberal politics in Salisbury.
I think that's a pretty firm answer to John. We'll move on to discuss more about the Conservatives in the next part.